little while after we'd bought our house in New South Wales, my husband and I decided it was time for us to really try seriously about having a baby. He didn't have any children. We only had my daughter. And he really wanted to be a father. And I was open to have another baby also, so that our family would be really complete. I wasn't on the pill or having any contraception at all. It just wasn't happening. So I went and seen my doctor, and she sent me to a specialist in Bathurst. And he put me on what I thought was a fertility drug. Well, it turned out it wasn't, and I put on about 40 kilos in a very short amount of time of a couple of months. Now, I was always small like I am now. I was always between 48 to 52 kilos as a young person, and with this drug, I went up to 98.3 kilos at my highest. I didn't realise what he'd done. I went to give blood, which I always used to give blood, one day, and the girl asked me what kind of drugs that I'd been on, and I told her I'd been on a fertility drug and told her what it was. And she said, "Oh my God, Loretta, that's not a fertility drug. That's a growth hormone. Haven't you noticed you've put on a lot of weight?" And I said, "Well, yeah, 40 kilos. And she said, "That will be the hardest weight, if ever, you can lose it." But it did take me 6 years of a huge struggle, and I did get all the weight off. And I am now back to my original weight where I used to be. But it's taken a long, long time. Also with this, we weren't able to have a baby. I used to feel like I fell pregnant all the time, but then I always felt that I had miscarried. We then went to a fertility clinic, an IVF clinic in Sydney, and we did 3 IVF cycles. They were very emotional to get through. After 3 final cycles and about $35,000 at that time, the fertility clinic finally decided to test the embryos, because they would take and I would fall pregnant. But when a certain gene would kick in, I would miscarry. So they finally tested our embryos, and they found out that there was a genetic disorder between my husband and I. We could both go and have kids to other people, but it was never going to happen together. So that was hard to take, but life went on. We accepted it. We both loved my daughter, and on with life. When I was going through the IVF, I was still working at the Orange Credit Union, and I was at work the day that they rang me the last time and said that they'd tested the embryos and that I was unable, my husband and I were unable to have a baby together. And then they wanted to put me in touch with support workers and things, because this is a really stressful period. And I said, "Oh no," I said, "I've got a lot of people here at where I worked. I've got a huge big support network." When you're going through things like that, it is so emotional. Don't hold it in to yourself. Tell your friends, because they are there for you. Okay? Talk about it. The more you hold these things up inside, the more it eats you away. I never held it inside. I let everybody know what was happening, because you can't just burst into tears in the middle of the office for no reason, and nobody know what's going on. So they all knew I was going through this emotional situation, and they were always there to help me, and I am so grateful for those people. About at the same time when I found that out, my daughter, who was a teenager now, she came home and told us that she was pregnant. She was in a relationship with a young boy. He was a really nice young kid. They had actually saved up and bought a house in Orange, their first home. And then she came in and told us she was pregnant. And on this day, I felt to myself, the universe was telling me, love this baby because you're not going to get one of your own. And I did love my granddaughter, and so does my husband. So then it was helping my daughter through her pregnancy. Now, on the same day that she found out she was pregnant, her half-brother passed away from a brain tumour, and that is why my granddaughter's named after him, because my daughter and him were very close. And I think I said in previous videos that the kids all got to know him, and he was only with us for a little while. Well, on the day that he passed away was the day that my daughter found out she was pregnant, and that's why my granddaughter carries his name. Also, within the first few years when I was down in New South Wales, yes, I said my mother had come down and for the wedding, and then I went up and seen the kids. Well, my mother used to ring often. She used to go over and look after my grandmother. She would make meals for her and things. Now, my grandmother was blind. I used to go up and visit my grandmother and my auntie and uncle every 6 months. I'd go for a drive up. But my mother used to go over there and look after my grandmother. My mother would ring me and say, oh, I sat on my glasses today. I can't go over and feed your grandmother. I need a new pair of glasses. Can you give me the money? So, of course, I wouldn't want my grandmother to starve, so I would give my mother money. Then she'd ring up the next little while and say, oh, I need new tyres on my car. I can't drive over and feed your grandmother. So I'd have to pay for tyres. Then, like, the rego would be due, or, something. And she would always use, I can't get over to look after your grandmother. So, of course, I would just keep handing out money all the time. And then I said to her, maybe you should come down here for a visit. And so she used to come down at least for 2 to 3 months every year when we were down there. And she used to help out with, housework and cooking and things while she was there, to help her save some money, because it never used to cost her any money while she lived there, other than her smokes. She never really used to save money while she was down there anyway. And I found out that while we were at work, she was walking down to one of the 2 pubs in Milthorpe and gambling all her money on the pokies. She used to, one day the publican said to me that your mother was here this morning about 15 minutes before the hotel opened, banging on the door wanting to get in and play the pokies. I was so embarrassed that my mother was doing that, and I said, don't let her in. And I actually worked at this hotel of a night time. I worked, my husband asked me if I would do one weekend to let these publicans have some time off and manage the hotel for him. Well, that turned into a huge thing too. I used to do Wednesday night, Friday night, all day Saturday night, and then some Sundays while I was working full time at my normal job. And I did that for about 12 months, and then it just got all too hard because I had my granddaughter at home as well. And I said, no, I can't do this anymore. It was just all too hard. But it was really embarrassing for my mother to go there doing that. My mother was down there at one stage. It was pretty close to Christmas, coming up for Christmas. And she may have even been staying down there for Christmas. Anyway, I had a Christmas party at work with the Orange Credit Union. We all went out. So I'd organised my mother to go down and stay with another lady down in town, a beautiful lady, friend of mine that I actually spend a lot of time with. She should have been my mother. And my husband was going down to the pub, and I went out. Well, I got home from being out this night, and I drove into the garage, and I nearly drove over top of my husband. Here was my husband asleep on the garage floor. And I got out of the car and I said, what are you doing here? And then he had told me that my mother never went out, that him and her had got into a discussion. And my mother said to him, in this discussion that what my stepfather did to me was my fault. Was not my fault. I was a 5-year-old child when he started doing what he did to me. And for my mother to say that, my husband didn't want to go back into the house. So I said, that's it, she's going home. I will organise to get her home tomorrow. And I did. So the next morning, my mother got out of bed and she come tromping through the house, stamping her feet and going on. And I said, I don't want to hear it. I have booked you on a bus to go home. You are going home today. So I drove her to Dubbo. I put her in the car. I said, pack your things, you're going home now. Packed her things. Because what was happening, she was getting older and she wanted to separate my husband and I so that I would go back to Brisbane and look after her. Well, that wasn't going to happen. So I made her pack her bags. I put her in the car. I had to drive her to Dubbo to catch the bus, and which is a bit over 2 hours from where I was. Now, all the way there in the car, she argued with me and just, yeah, your husband's no good, this is this and this. And I could not say a word. She never mentioned what she said to him about my stepfather, and I never mentioned it because I knew if I did, she would have started hitting me while I was driving and we would have had an accident. So I just had to sit there, shut up and not say a word. We got to Dubbo, I paid for her ticket, and then it was a couple of hours wait for her before the bus left. I gave her $50 so she had money, always looked after her, put her on the bus. I dropped her off on the side of the road because she was going down into the town to watch a movie while she waited for the bus. And then I drove home. I organised for someone to pick her up from the bus stop in Brisbane. When I knew she would be home, I rang her and I said, are you home safe? And she said, yes. I said, okay. And she said, I won't call you, you call me. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. And I never spoke to my mother again. So about 5 years had passed and my brother rang. My mother was ill and she was dying. He rang me about 2 weeks before she passed away and said, Mother's dying, she would really like to see you. And I said, look, I can't. She was at his house with him and his family. I said, I can't come. I have all these questions inside me and anger about why she would do this, and it wasn't the right time on her deathbed for me to go and do that. And it also wasn't the right time for my brother and his wife for me to walk in, blurt all this out, and then leave them to pick up the pieces. And then she passed away about a couple of weeks later. My brother rang me and asked me, told me that she passed away. Are you going to come for the funeral? I said, no, Michael, I'm sorry. I cannot come and pay my last respects to someone that I had no respect for. And I never went. And that was a decision I made. I have never been sorry for the decision that I didn't go. I was a bit sorry for my brother because he was the only one there, and plus a few other family and friends, but not our immediate family, and he had to wear the burden. I did help him pay for her funeral and a few other expenses that came along the way, but I did not attend the funeral. And I think that was the right decision for me.